Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So, hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here at Gendagala Aranya, a very beautiful background with a lovely view of the mountain behind. And so this week it's just been a quiet week. Vasa continues on. And traditionally during Vasa, monks will try to spend time alone, spend time secluded, and basically put down a lot of their other duties and focus on meditation. So there's many different teachings in the canon, and it can seem overwhelming actually, for some, the sheer number of teachings in the canon. But it's a kind of interesting thing when you see what a monk does during their normal day, and then what the teachings are. If you look at just the quantity of teachings in the canon about various things, you would think that monks should spend most of their day, studying or learning, various learning various doctrines, talking about various doctrines. That's how they should spend most of their day. That's what they should be engaged in. If you were just to look at the percentage of suttas, say, devoted to doctrine and the percentage devoted to explaining a monk's lifestyle. But it's going to get pretty boring for people if you give a Dhamma talk, and every Dhamma talk you say the same thing, like what a schedule is. That's going to get boring pretty quick. I remember when I first went to the monastery, when I first went to ordain at a Theravada monastery, and there was this kind of daily schedule. And the daily schedule was, nothing too exciting. There was like a work period. There was, meditation in the morning, meditation in the evening, and that was pretty much, and then, options for getting some gilampasa in the afternoon or whenever. And that was, more or less it. Kind of a couple work periods and a fair amount of free time in the afternoon. And I remember first going to another monastery before, a kind of a Zen monastery, and then later to this Theravada monastery, which had this very simple schedule. And people would ask you at the Theravada monastery, what's new? Well, nothing much is new. What's new? Well, you can just tell them the schedule, which is the same as what it was, a month ago, 2 months ago, a year ago. It's the same schedule. And I remember when I first joined the monastery, listening to the lives of my friends. And when you first step out of the monastery, there's all these milestones in people's lives. There's all these hallmarks in people's life that they're going through. And there's various events that lead up to those hallmarks that are significant. And at that time that I left, I think many of my friends were kind of like getting married in these things. You'd have get-togethers, or, when I first left, they were kind of meeting some of their like long-term partners who eventually they would get married to. And, there'd be like parties or get-togethers, like, you coming to this party? It's like, no, I can't, I'm living at the temple and don't go to parties anymore. And so, well, that's kind of weird. And, if you went to catch up with them, all these various things would have happened in their life, many kind of different exciting things. And it's like, well, what's new in your life? Well, I went and put up posters for meditation courses, and then I helped to set up lanterns for for a celebration, and I did a lot of cleaning, and I did meditation. This is what your life is like. It's kind of, in a sense, your life can become more boring, less stimulating and less exciting. There's not so many external events that build up to milestones, like a big marriage, or somebody having a baby, or getting their first job, or getting a promotion, or retiring, or whatever it might be. These kind of milestones recede into the background when somebody follows a schedule that the Buddha recommends. So it can seem like something very boring. The whole canon is all this doctrine. Then you've got these few suttas which describe the schedule of a monk, like what should a schedule be for a monk. And that schedule is generally pretty simple. It's basically you go on alms round, you return to the root of the same tree where you were before, and you spend your whole day meditating. And there's going to be some times when you have to sweep or clean. There's these things recommended in the rest of the canon. But in the time of the Buddha, and in the meditation traditions that have significantly revived people's faith, a significant percentage of a monk's day is devoted to meditation. It's kind of very simple life, kind of not a lot of exciting things happening there. But one what one does when one lives this life, when one establishes a routine, is one essentially sets a kind of a still backdrop to one's life. One makes the background of one's life still so that one can see what's moving more easily in the foreground. So, for example, this kind of background of these trees back here is very still. So, it's easy if I move my hands, people will notice a movement of my hand or a change in my voice. If there was thunder crashing, if there was a war going on behind me, if a UFO landed right behind me, then my talk would start to get lost into the background. It would become lost in the noise of what was happening in the background. So when one establishes a very simple routine that's the same every single day, then the background, one could say, of one's life, this routine, whatever one is doing on the day-to-day, becomes more still. It becomes more predictable. And as a result, whatever is going on in the mind, we call that the foreground. You can switch them up however you want, but I think you get the point. Whatever's going on in the mind, which may be the foreground, that comes into more sharp relief. It becomes more clear what's happening in the mind, what kind of perceptions the mind is generating, what kind of desires the mind has. And if one uses the Buddha's principles, it becomes much easier with this kind of same boring schedule to determine what it is that one is doing to cause oneself to suffer and what it is that one's doing to cause oneself to be happy, which is the entire point. So stepping into a schedule like this, stepping into more of a lifestyle where one is devoting more and more time to practice, is almost like stepping back from one's life. The stream of one's life starts to flow by more quickly. Days or months or years flow by, and one notices it less because one doesn't have all the markers of time, all the markers of change to add significance to these various periods of one's life. So sometimes when people come to practice, they forget what time it is, they forget what day it is, because every day is the same. Maybe you forget what year it is. If you're a monk, you can forget how old you are. Because the things that usually have relevance and are marked by these significant events that occur in the background, those events are not occurring. And what's more important is what's going on in the foreground. Now, we hold our life still like this so that we can recognize these things, because all the time the events in the background, the significance that we lend to them, the significance that we lend to these things in our life, and the way that their rise and fall causes us to suffer is hidden by the movement of these things. It can be. It's hidden by our desire for them. It's hidden by their change. It's hidden by the sorrow that we have when they go badly, by the elation that we have when they go well, and the constant search for the next big moment to shape our life in the next way that's meaningful. All the while, this kind of constant search, this constant change, misses some very fundamental truths in terms of what we are doing to cause ourselves to suffer and what we're doing to cause ourselves to be happy. So when monks quiet their life during vassa, or even ideally, maybe most of the time, monks still can do teaching during vassa as kind of a tradition, but it's a tradition to quiet one's life. But generally, the ideal that the Buddha lays out is a life that's mostly devoted to meditation, a life that's mostly devoted to training the mind. And this stepping back that happens from the things in one's life can go further into a stepping back actually into the mind. The mind, you can step back from one's thoughts to a certain extent, step back from one's perceptions, and there can be times when things are so busy, so raucous in the mind, and suddenly they quiet. Suddenly they can become still for a person, and they can become peaceful for a person. And these kind of pieces that one can develop from a lifestyle like this, that is more quiet, more still, that is receding away from the things that move so much, these kind of peace are much more satisfying, can be much more satisfying than anything that one can search for in the world, for these various markers, the next promotion or the culmination of one's career, preparing for retirement or whatever it might be. And the real peace that one is looking for is hidden in the movements of the things behind one. So whether one is a monk or a lay person, one ends up having to go through this process the more that one wants to practice, this process of pulling back from the things in one's life and making the external things in one's life more or less somewhat more still. Actually, monk's life, we can have some adventure. You can go into the forest and do trekking, and you can encounter, you can see beautiful things in the forest, encounter wild animals, and you can meet some very impressive monks. But the routine of one's life, the way in which one's practice, is generally a movement towards stillness, can be generally a movement towards stillness rather than more activity. And this stillness is what throws the things that cause us to suffer into sharp relief. However, it can be uncomfortable. This withdrawal from these things can be like a withdrawal from an addiction. So I remember when I first went to the monastery, I was sad, kind of felt sad to a certain extent. So, always these kind of mixed feelings. These guys, they're having so much fun. They're going to do this. They're doing that, and they're doing this. What kind of schedule do I have here? It's kind of a mixed feeling. You like the schedule, but at the same time, it's like, oh, well, you're doing this now, and then this now, and then this now. So there's a withdrawal from the way that we sustain ourselves by these external things. And that withdrawal is like any type of withdrawal to an addiction. Initially, it can be painful. It can be unpleasant. It can be something that causes one more suffering initially in this withdrawal. But if one gets used to it over time, one practices with it over time, then if one goes back to those things, if one engages in those things again, they seem unpleasant. They seem like something that's raucous, that doesn't bring any satisfying happiness, that has these serious consequences and trade-offs in terms of the mind. It makes the mind agitated, it makes it stirred up, it makes it so one can't sleep well, it makes it so that one is actually not peaceful, one needs to have all these various things all the time. And if one goes back into those things, then that's what one feels initially. So the Buddha gives this simile of a leper, and he says, what do you think if you see a leper and that leper is kind of cauterizing their sores on a fire? They take like a fire stick and they have all these sores and they're cauterizing them. And then a man were to give that leper medicine and cause his sores to heal. And then after his sores healed, he took the leper back to the fire and he would take a fire stick and basically, paraphrasing here, try to put it back to his skin. Would that leper twist and turn, this way and that? And the monks say, of course. And the Buddha says, well, was the fire always hot, always painful? Or previously, was it not hot, basically, and not painful, and only after? Or was it always hot and always painful? And the monks basically said it was always hot and always painful, but there was an aberration. There was a distortion in the perceptions of the leper. And the Buddha says, in a similar way, sensual pleasures are always painful, but it's because of distortions that people think that they're happy. So the more still that a person can make the mind, in a sense, the more peaceful it becomes. It's grabbing on to the things that shake outside that cause the mind to shake along with them. And this shaking brings elation, it brings suffering. The two are intertwined. So if one wants a more stable peace, then one can try to simplify one's life. One can try to simplify one's routine and put more and more of one's weight on the practice of the Dhamma, more and more of one's weight on the training of one's mind. And this will be painful at first. The things of one's life can start to flow by more quickly, and it's almost like one is stepping back from them. But it's a pain that brings pleasure in the long term, because if one's mind can settle into these types of practices, these types of training of the mind, then one can find much more peace such that if one has to go back to those things, then it can be like coming up to the fire. One can feel the heat. And the fire was always hot. It's not like it was cool and refreshing before. It's just that there was an aberration in a person's perception. So when we train in our mind in this way, we're training in the correct perception. We're training to find something that's really peaceful, and we're training to avoid this fire of sensuality, the fire of elation, the fire of sadness, and all the pain that comes along with searching for things that are not ours, that are impermanent, and that cause us to suffer. So these are some of the reasons that monks simplify their schedule during vasa, or simplify their schedule during life. It's to try to develop in these ways and to see these things with wisdom. Okay, so I think leave that for reflection, and wishing everybody all the blessings of Dhamma practice.